Well, hello. Welcome to the end of the week. You know, actually, I think I'm depressed. I mean, I just sort of started to realize that today. And the way that I know that I'm depressed is, you know, a lot of people, when you encounter them at work, they go, oh, well, at least it's Thursday. There's only one more day. Only it's Wednesday. I'm halfway. It's the hump day. I'm halfway through. You know, thank God it's Friday. I was thinking to these people, you need a different job. God, you really hate your job. Because I like my job. Either that or my weekend isn't so much better than my job or something that I never feel that way. But I kind of do feel that way today. But I'm telling you that now. And the reason I'm telling you that now is the first thing that we're going to talk about today on the nose, after I introduce the panelists, which I promised to do, is it's about a comedy special in which the person kind of shows her cards at the beginning. So maybe that's why I just did that. I have no idea why I just confessed to being depressed. And maybe I'm not really depressed. Anyway, joining us now for the nose, now that I've alarmed you, is Cara McDonough, a freelance writer. She's been with us many times. You can read her blog at caramcduna.com. That's CARAMCDUNA. I don't know if that was helpful to you or not, .com. We'll put it up on the webpage so you can get there. Bill Usman is a professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. He joins us by Skype. Later on in the show, we'll be talking about the beautifully Connecticut-focused I Know This Much Is True by the William Faulkner of Southeastern Connecticut, Wally Lamb. And this is an adaptation starring Mark Ruffalo as two fairly different twins, and also has some pretty tremendous supporting performances by Catherine Hahn and Rose O'Donnell and Arjun. Anyway, more to come about that. At the beginning here, this is the second time we've talked about this comedian, Hannah Gadsby. She became famous a few years back with a special called Nanette. That was in 2018. And at that point, I guess she'd been, well, actually, you know what we should do? We should just get going here. So we can say all this stuff contextually as we go along. But before we get going and have the panel discuss it, let's just hear a little clip from the opening of the new special, which is called Douglas.
I had no plans to make it in America. This was not on my agenda. And then what happened, though, is I wrote a show called Nanette, right? Well then, that's clear, isn't it? That's why you're here. You're not here because of my back catalogue of prior, are you? Which does beg the question, if you're here because of Nanette, why? Like, don't get me wrong, it's a good show, solid bit of work. I'm quite fond, but it was a particular show of a very particular flavour. And if that is what is bought, what the f*** are you expecting from this show? Because I'm sorry, if it's more trauma, I'm fresh out. Had I known just how wildly popular trauma was going to be in the context of comedy, I might have budgeted my a bit better. Honestly, I could have built quite the career out of it, at least a trilogy, but I went and put all my trauma eggs into one basket like a idiot, and now here we are. You want more?
All right, so maybe we need to explain, and Bill, I think, were you on the original show where we talked about Nanette? I can't remember.
I was.
Yes,
I'm your Gatsby specialist.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So maybe you'd like to explain to the audience what it is she's making reference to, or why, in fact, people coming on into this special would have different expectations.
Sure. So in 2018, Hannah Gadsby had this wildly successful Netflix special called Nanette. I have to admit, I had never heard of her before because I am one of those Americans that she's referring to. And I think that what really made Nanette stand out was that it was much more than just your typical stand-up comedy special. It kind of started out that way, and then it became this blazingly angry explosion, really, about patriarchy, about the abuse that she has suffered in her world, in her life, about the things that she has struggled with. And it really, I think, really challenged people to kind of rethink what they expected from specials like that. And she does refer to that at some point in this show. Maybe at some point we can talk about whether it's even productive in any way to try to put a box around what is stand-up comedy or what isn't. So, this was such a successful show, Nanette, that was in one of those uncomfortable positions about how she was going to follow it up. She had said during Nanette that she was quitting comedy because she just couldn't deal with it anymore. She couldn't deal with the self-deprecation of it. But I think we all kind of knew that wasn't true, and especially not when it became so successful.
Right. I mean, even if she had genuinely planned that, suddenly she went from being a person whom, as she references in the clip that we played, people in America had never heard of her. She hadn't made it in America at all. She had, a pretty rich comedy career in Australia, but not so much here. So Kara, this is not Nanette at all. Douglas is sort of a more conventional comedy special, although there's a couple of tricks to it, and the main trick is one where she spends really a long chunk of the beginning explaining what the structure of the comedy special is going to be, setting up jokes and creating a certain set of expectations. I'm being told by Jonathan McPants, 14 minutes and 40 seconds, which is a lot in the world of comedy, is spent just saying what's coming. So Karen McDonough, how did that work for you?
So I loved it. I love Douglas. And I will say also that the whole reason I watched Nanette and heard of Hannah Gadsby was because I heard you guys discuss it on The Nose. So this is a nice full circle. And I loved that too. And that special was a jaw-dropping moment for me. I watched it. I think my jaw dropped when she kind of exploded at the end, as Bill just said, and then promptly texted every single person I knew and told them they had to watch it. This was different, as you just mentioned. The setup worked for me. I think I knew she was going to do that because we had discussed it, so I was anticipating it. And I think she had to do it a little bit because of how she left the last special. She said she wasn't going to do comedy anymore. She sort of made it a whole thing that her setup was different, that maybe she's not a comedian. So I think in setting it up, she was sort of almost a little bit mocking herself and saying, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll lay it out for you. This is what this special is going to look like. And then I was a little worried, especially at first. It wasn't rolling as much for me. It wasn't as funny for me. But by the end, I thought that she landed everything perfectly. And I thought that the setup, made the jokes all the better. I think some of them, frankly, wouldn't have worked without the setup. We had to know they were coming. It was like a little aside. And I think she sort of enclosed the audience and herself in this little sort of society by doing that. I felt like we were all in this joke together. And her enemies were sort of, on the outside, and that we were all in this as one happy family who got what she was doing.
Right. And so I will be honest and say that I didn't like this special, and I feel like I'm on shaky ground in a number of different ways, including the fact that she kind of indemnifies herself against people who don't like like her comedy, in kind of the way that you suggested, particularly if those people are men, And but by the way, I would freely acknowledge that comedy is always a two-way street. So, I mean, I have some very specific criticisms of Gadsby, but I also know that I'm a man. I just admitted to being depressed at the start of the show. That might make me less fertile ground for comedy. But for me, anyway, I thought we should say a little bit more about the structure of this, though. So she does sort of divide it up into different chunks. The chunks are pretty short, so she goes from some observational comedy about Americans through to a story about a visit to a doctor and a conversation she had in a dog park. She also talks, she does kind of an art lecture about the Renaissance at one point. I'm skipping a few. There's some stuff about golf Ralph and Where's Waldo? And I have things to say about all of this, but I also don't want to monopolize the conversation that much. The one thing that I will say, and I will get this thing out of the way because then I'll step back because I want to hear what you guys liked about it. One of the things she does in the setup, which she's talking about the structure to come. She says that there's going to be a Louis C.K. joke, and it's going to be we're going to forget that she promised it, so it's going to be this big surprise, and it's going to be such a good joke that it's going to be a mic drop joke, although she's not the kind of person who would ever drop a mic, so she's going to gently put the mic down on the floor, blah, 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 blah. And I have to say that when the joke comes, it's not that good. And I found myself thinking, given everything that has preceded, including, and I left this out, the fact that she talks a lot about she herself being autistic. I look at Louis C.K. right now and I think, obviously, he is guilty of some pretty significantly bad behavior, but I also think he has a psychological problem. I mean, normal people don't do what he's accused of doing, and he's not R. Kelly. He's this guy who had this compulsion to do this really weird thing. And he's pretty much finished in show business as far as I can tell. So why you would want to really kind of land your special with, there's some talk about punching up and punching down, a guy who's already basically just destroyed. You want to kick him one last time. Not really that good a joke, not a mic drop joke. I didn't think, at that point I thought, well, and I don't know what I thought actually, but anyway, that is, that's sort of my biggest problem in a way, is that I almost felt like she wasn't who she claimed to be, which is this kind of deferential person who always assumes things are her fault. I don't think she's that person at all. I think she thinks it's our fault. Anyway, I'll shut up. Bill, talk about some of the things you liked or push back against me.
Well, first, I'm going to diagnose why you didn't like it, because I actually know the real reason.
Okay.
I think Declan got to you, and he's mad that she named the special after her dog, and he's pressuring you to change the name of this show to the Declan Show, and you don't want to do that, so you're just irritated, and I really think that's the basis for all of your dislike of the special.
Well, Declan, who is my dog and who is sitting in what he now considers to be his assistant producer chair here in the room right now, is neither assenting nor disagreeing with you.
He knows. We know. Yeah. We know the truth. I did like it. I liked it a fair bit. It made me laugh a fair bit. I think you're right about the climax of it, and why Louis C.K. was not the mic drop moment, but the gently put the mic on the ground moment, which I did find kind of funny. Because, you are right. He's a really easy target at this point. I was just kind of thinking while you were saying that at this point in time, it really wouldn't be, any great act of courage to hit Sean Spicer in the face with a cream pie. Mm-hmm. It would be a great act of courage to hit Jared Kushner or somebody in the face with a cream pie, and I would be all about that. But Sean Spicer, really, it's like the moment has kind of passed, but we're still beating up on Louis C.K. So I think that's a pretty fair point. What I liked about it is I think that the success of Nanette put her in a really tough position, which, I'm a huge music fan, and we talk a lot about the sophomore slump, the bands that come out with an amazing, great, innovative first album, and then they just come out with something that's kind of run of the mill. And I think that's always a problem for people who have that kind of success. It wasn't really a sophomore slump for her because, as we've said, she had this whole previous career. But in terms of global attention, I think she pretty successfully, for the most part, avoids a sophomore slump. I think it's a good comedy special, and that I was okay with it being, a good comedy special that made me laugh. It's not innovative or groundbreaking in the way that Nanette was, but it would be very difficult to be that. I think she had a tough decision to make, and her decision in this one was to go meta. Spending that first 15 minutes telling us the show hasn't even really started yet, but this is what's to expect. This is what's coming. You're going to be surprised, but you're not really going to be surprised. And I have to admit, that works for me personally because I'm a sucker for meta. I love meta. Later on in the show, she even does a bit about it being meta. And, how much more meta can you get than that? So those aspects of it really worked for me. And I could see what a tough position she was in with this follow-up show.
So, Kara, tell me more about the stuff that you liked too.
Sure. So I like Bill did. I liked that it was meta. I liked that it was kind of overly clever. Sometimes that doesn't work for me. Sometimes I find that too precious or annoying, but I don't know, maybe it's just my mood right now. I needed that sharp sort of back and forth comedy where 1 minute she was talking about a serious subject like gender politics. The next minute she was making a joke about Where's Waldo. I don't know, but that really worked for me. That sort of bright, tight comedy. Right now, that really worked for me. I was trying to flesh this out and just decide what to say about this. I just find her very charming. I think, Colin, that you said that she doesn't seem to be the person that she is sometimes. And I actually agree about the Louis C.K. joke. When she said she was going to make a Louis C.K. joke, I was immediately like, not him again. We're done with him. And I don't think the joke was that great. I loved that she gently placed the mic on the ground. I think that really worked. Maybe there could have been a much stronger joke there, something else to leave us with. But I thought the comedy was funny. And I'll admit to you guys that I'm kind of a lightweight when it comes to comedy. I get uncomfortable really, really quickly. I tend to not like comics when they try to be offensive, which I think is, I think I've even discussed with you before as kind of a modern theme. How far can you go? And to me, for whatever reason, she doesn't do that. She has, I don't know if you would agree with me or if this sounds crazy, but there's something polite about the way she discusses uncomfortable situations. There's something heightened about it that really appeals to me. But maybe that might be because I'm a little bit of a wimp sometimes. But this comedy special was kind of exactly what I needed right now.
There's a sort of a Southern trope that when you, particularly among Southern ladies, if I may be gender specific, that when you really are burying the dagger into somebody who's not there, then you just say, and bless her heart. And I think she's got maybe there's an Australian version of that, because I think there's a little bit of what you say, Kara, that she seems polite and deferential, but there's also a way in which she really is going for the jugular. I'll just say one more thing about the sort of technique driven, because I also agree that there's a thoughtfulness about some of her work, but I think also she does something, and she's by no means the only comedian who does it, but she trains her audience to know where the jokes are, and where the jokes are, particularly in the, final 2/3 of the special, it's a joke when she's yelling the punchline and usually has the F word somewhere in that yell. And what happens as a result of that is that you can sort of see the audience kind of going, okay, yeah, this is when we laugh. We laugh when she does that. And as a result, she doesn't get laughs for some of the material that I found a little bit more thoughtful. And I'll give you an example. She's doing a whole thing. She's already established that she's somewhere on the autism spectrum. And then she starts talking about anti-vaxxers. And at one point she says this whole idea about, the fears that anti-vaxxers have. She finally says, look, I'm autistic and I'm willing to take one for the team. Now, she doesn't say it. She doesn't yell it. She doesn't use the F word. It's a really smart, funny little observation that you need half a beat to absorb what she's suggesting. And she literally gets zero laugh from that, because she's trained her audience to look for the laughs someplace else. It is a little bit like Where's Waldo? And I thought that's too bad, because really I think I agree with you, Kara, that some of the asides, the little throwaways, are actually where I was really liking her a lot better, and she was teaching her audience to look for the home runs. So I don't know, Bill, I could tell you have something to say here.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. She says some things as just almost like quieter asides, which, it would almost be good if she was working with someone who would say, no, don't sleep on that one. That one's really good. But there are quite a few of those just kind of asides that would be really easy to miss. She does, as Kara said, she whiplashes back and forth between just completely silly Where's Waldo and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but she always connects them to the politics of gender, and she finds a way to make the silly very political, and she finds a way to make the political very silly. And I like that. I like that whiplash that she does. And in terms of the yelling, I thought a little bit about Lewis Black, who also does, the fake outrage yelling thing. And it's so much a part of what he was, of who he is as a comedian. And then I realized they both even do the same pushing up of their glasses just after they get done yelling. So I don't know, but I kind of almost wonder if Lewis Black has been a big influence on her work, because I did see that resonance there.
It makes me wonder, Kara, what she really is like in person, because I hadn't I hadn't made the connection that Bill has made. I had an opportunity one time to warm up an audience for Lewis Black, and he's been on the show, and we kind of talked off the air, and you will probably be unsurprised to find out he really isn't that guy at all. He's this a little on the quiet side, very reflective, somewhat deferential, not super confident about himself. So Kara, maybe she's telling the truth really when she says, because at one point she says something like, I'm the kind of person who, when things get awkward, I assume it's me. I assume I'm doing something wrong. And maybe that really is who she is.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what I like about her. And I think if she, yelling aside and obviously performance aside, I think if I thought that she wasn't pretty much who she was on stage, I wouldn't like her as much. I think there's an authenticity to her talking about her personal experience that I really enjoy. And also just her observations, me personally, it's subjective. I just agreed with so many of them. There's the section where she's having her puffer fish moments where she's talking about things that make her angry. And I just so wholeheartedly agreed with every single one of them.
Oh, yeah. It's really easy for me to like her because, we're completely on the same side of the political spectrum. That's for sure. And so it does make it easier for me to, just give myself over to what she's doing.
Right, absolutely. Well, we should probably wrap this up. And I apologize for being the skunk at the garden party too. I mean, there is a lot to chew on in this special, and I may have also not just been in the mood for it. I will say
every garden party needs a good skunk.
Yeah, I will say that. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble for this too, but the whole time I was watching her, and I don't know who's been on the nose with whom and who's been on the nose physically present. Back in the day, we were all in the same room with whom, but I kept thinking she looks like Jim Chapdelain's short cousin from Australia. I mean, there's something about the shape of her face, and maybe, I don't know, the glasses. I can't figure out what it was. I kept thinking this, like if Jim Chapdelain were not a tall, slender West Hartford guy, but I don't know. Anyway, I just had to get
such a yeller too.
Yeah, it's such a yeller too. Yeah,
I haven't met him yet, but I'll definitely bring that up if I ever do.
When you meet him, it'll bother you now that the whole Hannah Gadsby thing. All right, I mentioned that to him in an email, and as far as I can tell, he's not speaking to me anymore. So we'll go to a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about Wally Lamb's wonderful novel turned into a miniseries.
Douglas apple tree, have a wife, now let her be. Give me what you got. I'm gonna make you what you're not. Douglas, prickly pear.
All right, so we are back. and we are talking to Kara McDonough, a freelance writer. You can read her blog at karamcdonough.com. I'm not going to spell it out this time. Bill Usman is professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University, and he's joining us by Skype. That's important for some reason. It's important to the people at Skype that we say this, apparently. Anyway, Kara's on Zoom if you have to know these things. So I Know This Much Is True is a 6-part HBO miniseries based on the 1998 novel by Wally Lamb, which was his second novel. The series premiered May 10th. And 3 episodes have aired so far. I feel as though, well, let's maybe just begin. I think all of us agree that one of the really great supporting performances in this series is by Rosie O'Donnell, with a role and a look that we haven't really seen from her before. At least I can't really think of what I would compare it to, but maybe I don't know all of her work or something like that. But anyway, so she plays kind of this intake person as one of these 2 brothers. The brothers are Dominic and Thomas Birdsey. Thomas has a lifelong severe psychiatric illness problems. He's because he has done, and this is not a spoiler, it happens in the first 3 minutes. Or I'll let the panel vote on this. Should we tell them? Should we tell them what happens in the first 3 minutes, or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I think it's fine.
Right.
Important.
Right. So in the first 3 minutes, Thomas, having an episode and also concerned about war in particular, is in a public place. He actually chops off his own hand in public. He's taken to a hospital for the physical problem, but then he's taken in at a different kind of institution from the one where he had been residing. I think that's enough setup. Here's Rosie O'Donnell as Lisa Sheffer and Mark Ruffalo as Thomas's brother, Dominic. Mark also plays Thomas as well. Anyway, here we go.
Dr. Ellers is no longer your brother's doctor. He has been reassigned.
Reassigned by who?
The State Commissioner's office in Hartford. It's not all bad news, though. Dr. Patel is his new psychologist, who is absolutely fantastic.
All right, no, Dr. Ellers is my brother's doctor. He has been my brother's doctor treating him for the last 4 years, successfully for the most part.
Successfully. Your brother cut off his hand.
Every single time he's ever had an episode, he ends up at Settle. So why would he end up here, all right? He's practically a fixture down there. And if you made one phone call, if you took the time to listen to what I'm saying to you, and you made a phone call...
I don't like your tone.
Hey, sorry.
I really don't. No, you can leave if you want to. I'm an advocate. I'm here for you and for your brother. So knock it off.
Listen to me. My brother doesn't belong here. He's got no defenses.
I understand.
He's probably freaking out right about now. It's like putting a bunny rabbit in a pack of wolves. He's not going to survive here. And it's going to be on you.
Well, it's not going to be on me, but thanks for saying that. I'm going to give it to you straight, Dominic, okay? Your brother was placed in a forensic hospital because he's seriously mentally ill, and he committed a serious crime.
So I have lots of things that I want to say about this, but I'm going to defer to the panel and get things going here. So, Kara, I don't know, just sort of maybe give me your overall sense of how things are going. We're halfway in to what is a fairly searing and at times almost unrelievedly dark portrait of a very small, tattered nuclear family trying to deal with serious mental illness and a bunch of other problems. So this is not going to be, this is not His Girl Friday, but how is it working for you?
Oh, unbelievably, is such a good way to put it. We're halfway in. I watched the 3rd episode last night, which is the most recent one. And I'm going to be honest, I had to sort of force myself to watch it. I did not want to watch it. I wanted to watch something familiar and fast-paced, but I watched it. And I said this in the lead-up discussion we were having before we came on the air, but I really like this show. I think it's incredibly well done. I think Mark Ruffalo is like a revelation in this. When I was watching for him, I've never felt this way about an actor, but I almost felt, I don't know, badly for him or something for just having to do this gut-wrenching job of playing both of these brothers who have undergone so much. But I don't like watching it because it's so filled with misery. And I think these are important stories to tell. I think that the novel, which I haven't read, I'll say, is telling a very important, a crucial story, and a story, as we've discussed, that doesn't often get told. But for me right now, and I really do think that right now might be part of this for me, is this is a story about really hard to solve problems. There's a lot of extreme close-ups and staying in the moment in this series. I've found they really stay in difficult moments. There's a scene, I think it's the first one, but I might be wrong, where they're taking Thomas away to the more high-level security facility, and they just stay in the moment for such a long time, where his poor brother is just losing his mind that this is happening, and it's close-up shots, and it is, that the situation is not going to go either of their way, but you're forced to watch it. And I found that so difficult, and there's a lot of moments like that. Of course, as we were just discussing, there's a lot of moments of sort of wonderfully subtle levity too, like with Rosie O'Donnell's character. She's a very serious character in this, but I love, she's kind of this worn out social worker. And I love the way she handles Mark Ruffalo's dominant character. I think anyone who's dealt with a small child having a tantrum understands that sort of, you just keep saying to them, nope, this isn't going to work. And I think she's amazing in the role.
Yeah. How about you, Bill? Give me some of your takes here.
Yeah, I'm mostly in the same place where Kara is. It's hard to say that it's a show I'm enjoying, because it's not fun to watch. And I think it's particularly difficult to watch right now, with everything that's happening. I don't want to go too far off track, but I was watching the news last night, and, Colin, I think it makes perfect sense if you're depressed, because I feel like I'm depressed too. I don't know how you can be paying attention to what's happening without being depressed. And so then to immerse yourself in this unrelentingly bleak story, it's tough. It's a tough road. But I think that has something to do with how it's being told and the story itself, but also something to do with the context in which we're watching it. I was actually struggling a little bit last night about thinking that we're going to come on here today and, we're going to talk about what is purportedly entertainment, when really there is so much to be mourning right now. But I think that both the Hannah Gadsby special and I Know This As Much Is True, they are both about pain in some ways, in very, very different ways, but they're both about pain. And I think we do need cultural stories, and we need to invest ourselves in cultural stories that help us to become more empathetic people, that help us to understand pain and to live in pain a little bit. So I don't think there's any conflict in talking about these things, for an hour while there's so much else going on in the world. And as a show itself, I think there's some problems, but I think for the most part, they do a very good job of telling this unrelentingly sad narrative.
Right. So I want to say a few things here. First of all, I'm an unreliable narrator because I've known Wally Lamb forever. Like, he was a teacher who had not written a book when I first met him, and he's of course gone on to incredible glory. This particular book was the second Oprah Book Club book by Wally Lamb. She's Come Undone being the first. Nobody had ever done that before. Nobody had ever done the Oprah thing twice. This book, what I'm missing, I think, well, let me just say a couple other things. One of the things that I love about Wally's work, and I think I would love it even if I didn't know him and love him, is that he has made southeastern Connecticut into his Yoknapatawpha County, or however you say that county that's in all the Faulkner books. He lives it to his fingertips, and it's there. It's these stories, these novels are always the stories of people who are either working class or middle class, but not doing that great with them in the middle class. There's not enough of that, and there's certainly not enough of that in TV and movies. And he just gets it all so right because he knows it so well. And but the other thing that he has is, while he's really funny, like he's fairly funny person, and I think he's often a very funny writer, and some of the books that he's done more recently have been sort of out-and-out comic things. One of the things that makes this book work and tick is the narration by Dominic in the book that always has a little tinge of humor about it, and also some self-observation. I mean, one of the problems with this series at times is that it's hard to find somebody to like. You do like the clinicians, but, Thomas Birdsey is just a mess, and Dominic is too. There's a lot of questions about, well, who's really crazy here? Who can be helped? Archie Punjabi says that I actually have 2 mentally ill brothers in my care. There's one of them I think I could actually fix. But what we don't get, I think what this series is missing kind of is Wally's voice, which he's so good at getting these little bits of self-observation by the narrator, where the narrator goes, oh yeah, I didn't mean it to say it that way, but it came out as a threat. And I sort of wish that there is a little bit of narration there. I wish it had more of what I know and love about Wally Lamb's writing voice. But I don't know. What else, Kara? There are some pretty amazing performances. Juliette Lewis, Archie Punjabi, Rosie O'Donnell. And as you're saying, Ruffalo is doing this crazy thing, where he lost 20 pounds to play Dominic and then put on 40 pounds to play Thomas. But it's much more than that kind of parlor trick.
Right. Yeah. His performance is incredible. And the close-ups, in the same way that they do these sort of lingering in the scenes, there are these close-ups of his face that are just, I don't know, they're sort of ravaging. Like the pain on his face is just so tangible. And I think his performance is amazing. But the supporting roles, I mean, while I really, really enjoy what he's doing, the supporting roles, maybe because I needed something to break the misery, are incredible. I already mentioned Rosie O'Donnell. Juliette Lewis in that first episode does this wonderful, very Juliette Lewis, perfectly uncomfortable, insane sort of episode that was so enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to her coming back. It sounds like she will. I also love Catherine Hahn as his ex-wife. They've also suffered a terrible loss. There's another whole storyline there. And then is it Rob Hubel who plays his friend?
I think that I don't. Is that the actor's name? Yeah. Who
plays Dominic's good friend and has a couple really great, very, very funny lines. But I want to also go back to one thing that Bill said that really struck me is that what you were talking about pain in the world right now, and listening to these stories about pain. I think I was getting sort of annoyed at myself by being so put off by this sad story, because I was like, maybe now is the time, just sink in. Maybe this is the time to hurt and listen to the sad stories. I mean, maybe distraction isn't always the ticket. And so I will finish it, especially because it only goes to 6. But my feelings of any feelings I have of not enjoying this experience are really related to the tragedy of the story. And I also I was a little bit confused about a few plot situations. I think, Colin, what you were saying about the narration is probably right on. I was a little confused going from the pilot to the second episode about the plot a tiny bit, but not nearly enough to lose the story for me.
So before we hear from Bill, who will probably wind up having the last word here, first of all, Mr. Pants just pointed out, we also shout out these the performance of the younger Birdsey twins, the Birdsey twins when they're in college, is also kind of amazing in the way that he manages to get some Ruffalo into those performances also. So whatever, I don't know the actor's name, but before we do that, before we wrap up here, it's worth just noting that there are obviously a number of scenes where Ruffalo plays Dominic and Ruffalo plays Thomas, and they are the only people in the scene, and they are talking to one another. I'm being told Philip Ettinger is the name of the actor doing the college performance. But I think we should play one of them just to see you maybe get a chance to hear what goes back and forth between the same actor being two characters.
What do you want to eat? What do you want, buddy? Oil companies, America. We're living on borrowed time, Dominic. We're just wallowing in our greed and spiritual filth. And now it's time to pay. We're going to pay the price.
I don't mean to
And
change the subject.
somebody
How's
has
your
to-
coffee cart?
How do
How's
we
your
kill
business?
people for the sake of cheap oil? How do we justify that?
How's your business, huh?
How are we going to prevent the vengeance of God? If we have no respect for human life.
I don't know, buddy. What do you want to eat?
Have you had time to look at the menu?
Can't worship both God and money, Christian. America's going to vomit up its own blood.
I'll get a cheeseburger. No fries, salad on the side. What do you want?
Want hot dogs? Hot dogs.
Hot dogs.
Thank you. Thank you. You're a good brother to me.
So, Bill, one of the things I like about that scene too is,
Heartbreaking.
it's heartbreaking, but it's also to get back to the point that both of you are making. Thomas, who is the crazy institutionalizable person, is in so many ways, and this isn't that unusual, the prophetic one, the one who's actually in many cases talking about real things in a way that's identifiable in the way that both of you guys have been saying right now. In other words, right now, we really have to make a choice between getting real or trying to paper over things. Dominic in this scene and others is, eager to distract and eager to paper over. And once again, you do start wondering, well, who exactly is crazy here?
Yeah, that line, America is going to vomit up its own blood. Go take a look at the newspapers today and see if that line is not indeed prophetic. And not just one story, but several different ones. Yeah, it's tough going, but I think it's an important story. I don't know if this is a criticism. There is no air in the way it's being told as a miniseries. I haven't read the novel, but in the miniseries, there is no air. Even the visuals of it, it's very somber, there's no color. It's all different muted shades of gray. But I do think it's a well-told story. And one of the things that comes out in the clip that you just played, one of the things I like about it that maybe is a little bit of air is that there are a lot of small acts of kindness in the story that I found very emotionally moving. There's also a scene where Dominic takes Thomas to a McDonald's after a traumatic incident because that's all that Thomas wants. And they're sitting eating in their car, and there's something about this adult man, Thomas, getting such comfort from this bad fast food that's just was incredibly poignant to me. And there are lots of scenes where people do something very, very kind to someone else, which I got a lot out of.
All right, we're going to stop there. I won't tell Michael Pollan what you said about McDonald's, and we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll make some. We'll make some recommendations. All right, we're back with Bill Usman and Karen McDonough. Time to make some recommendations, but before we do that, I have to thank Kat Pastor. She's there in the studio right now making the whole show hum, and that means that we can work remotely, we meaning me and Jonathan McPants, who is the producer of The Nose and of today's episode, therefore. And so thanks to to both of them and all the other people who are behind us, helping us, and we're short on time, so I won't name them all, but we'll be back on Monday. We're going to keep doing some of the work we do on Monday about the medical science behind COVID-19. We'll have Alan Dove, who is just a terrific researcher who appears on This Week in Virology. All right. So Karen McDonough, why don't you go first? What are you going to recommend to us?
Sure. So I actually have not been ingesting that much new media or books or anything during this pandemic. I think it's largely because there's just family members all around me all the time. But one thing, and this is kind of a vague endorsement, and it's specific to me, but and people of my age group, but I have been listening to a ton of 90s music, which was recommended by a friend of a similar age. It's the music that was popular when I was in high school and college and really spoke to my, any angst I had, any unfounded rage. But I went and I put a ton of 90s bands that I liked on my running mix, and I've been playing it when I'm running and also all the time.
Okay, you got to name like 3 of the bands.
Yeah, Weezer I put on there,
Yeah.
Cake, I put on A Tribe Called Quest, I put on Arrested Development. And it's totally doing it for me. And I don't know if it's just that I want familiarity. I want something that makes me remember a different time, and maybe, that I know all the words to, that you can scream in the car.
Yeah.
Or you can't really scream on a run. I guess you can do whatever you want now. People are accepting all sorts of things.
Or
But,
not accepting them. Yeah, I just want to react to this by saying, anytime you hear 90s music played on this show, we are doing it because we think John Dankosky might be listening. We want to enrage him. However, because he hates all of these. But you just named, I think, 4 bands that he doesn't hate from the 90s, so that was pretty impressive.
Excellent. I don't want to be on his bad side.
But like the other day, we played Breakfast at Tiffany's. The only reason we played that going out of a break was I was hoping Dankosky was listening and he would drive off the road or something.
Well, that enrages me too, so that's good. I'm glad.
Okay.
I'm glad.
So, Bill, what are you going to recommend to us?
Well, the first endorsement that I have to make is of my wife, Lori, because she gave me permission to do this on our wedding anniversary.
Ooh,
happy anniversary.
I mean, it's not like I had to leave the house to do it or anything, but still, she was willing to let me come upstairs and do this. But my other endorsements, very first is there's a great tribute to the late Larry Kramer in today's New York Times by Tony Kushner. And they had a long and often difficult relationship, and definitely read this. It's not very long, but it's very, very touching. So that's the Tony Kushner piece in the New York Times on Larry Kramer. And then my other one is a show that I absolutely love. This is a strong endorsement. It's a show on Hulu called Rami. It features the American Egyptian comedian Rami Youssef. And it had its first season last year, and the new season actually debuts tonight. This is a great show about a young Egyptian American man. You can see, it's him trying to come to grips with his Muslim identity, but also being torn by American culture. I can't recommend this show enough.
He was also interviewed this morning on Morning Edition. Give a really interesting interview. I think with David Green.
It's so good. Now, I'll warn you, some of it is really controversial and politically incorrect. Some people find it really offensive. It might not be for you, Kara, but it's one of these kind of auteur comedy series, kind of like Donald Glover's Atlanta or Pamela Adlon's Better Things, that strives to be more.
Bill Usman, I hate to interrupt you, but we actually are pretty much out of time here. But Rami on Hulu is recommended. All right, Kat, you can bring the music up. I will hold my recommendations over until next week. Because then I'll have them. All I have to do is remember. No, that's good. That's actually a good thing. All right. So thanks to everybody who listened. Thanks to everybody who helped out in getting the show together. And we will be back on Monday to tell you a little bit more about the medical science behind the situation we're in right now.